Hello everyone, welcome back to 15 days of React design pattern. I am Tapas and today we are diving into one of the most fundamental and powerful pattern in React development, the container presenter pattern. This pattern has another name as well. Some people call it as smart dumb components pattern. I don't like this name. I don't want to call a component as a smart component or a dumb component. Rather, let's call it container and presenter components, and that's how container and presenter patterns come into picture. As React developers with years of experience, we have all encountered components, right? If you are already working on React, you know that. And what happened gradually, the number of components we start putting into our application, it grew as monsters. Component becomes so big that it handles business logic, it handles API calls, it handles state management, it handles rendering, everything in one place. To solve that problem, the first design pattern that we'll be learning today in day 01 is a container presenter design pattern. So what are we going to learn today? We will learn a bunch of things. First, how to identify code smell. In the last video in day 0, I told what code smell is and what kind of problem you can encounter because of code smell. So in today's session, we'll be looking into the code first, an existing code, and try to identify what are the code smells and why those are code smells. Then we'll bring the pattern to implement it to reduce the code smell and refactor the code that is already written in a much better way by introducing the container presenter pattern. Then we'll talk about many other real world use cases where you can use this container presenter pattern. And then we'll be talking about where you should not use, what kind of problem this pattern can have. Now, one thing to remember, guys, here, whenever you are using design pattern, there will be something that you need to be mindful about. It's called anti-pattern. Now, developers use design pattern, that's great, but sometimes they use or apply the pattern in some places where they should not be, and that become an anti-pattern. That's the places where you should not be using this design pattern. The same thing goes for any design pattern. Today we're going to talk about the container presenter design pattern and its potential pitfalls, and at the end I'll be giving you a task. If you are coming from the 40 days of JavaScript initiative, you're already aware, like after every session there will be task assignment, and I expect you to do those tasks and come back before you see the next video. And that is the reason I don't like to provide video every day. I want you to take time, do the task well, because those tasks are not trivial. You need to spend some time to do that, and you can submit that. I'm going to talk about it towards the end. How can you submit those tasks? And then you get ready for the next session. I'm sure that most of you who are taking these 15 days of React design patterns are aware of React, like how React works. Maybe at the basic level, some of you might be in the advanced level. And I also think that there might be someone who are not aware of React at all. They probably know about JavaScript and they want to start their journey with React. Now, is this a right place to start the journey of React? If you ask me, my answer will be definitely yes. Because in this 15 days of React design patterns, you are going to learn how to code React the right way. Now, I cannot start showing you a React code and expect you to understand everything from the ground up if you don't know anything about React. So what I want you to do, I want to put a certain prerequisites that I feel that you must learn first before you start taking the course of or the session of one of the design pattern. So for today's episode where we're talking about container presenter design pattern, there are certain prerequisites that you need to go through if you are not aware of React at all. Once you finish them, please come back to this episode, finish it, do the task. I'm sure that you will be a very confident developer. But in case you're already aware of these concepts, please go on, get started. So what are those concepts? You need to have the knowledge of the first thing first is JSX. React uses a syntax called JSX where you can write JavaScript, HTML, CSS all together. I spoke in the last session that what a component is and why JSX is important for component. So you have to have knowledge of what JSX is. If you don't know about it, you can learn from anywhere. I have also created a video. The link to this video will be in the description of this video. The next thing you have to learn about components. What component does, and that is where the state, props, all this thing come into picture. So it's very important that you have some idea about components. Again, there is a video and you can find the link in the description. Then you have to learn about a hook called useState. When you want to work with state in React, you need a hook called useState. So learn about that. And then the final thing that you need to learn is called use effect. So these 4 videos are already existing. Please go ahead, find the links in the description and start learning. I'm sure that once you get a great grip on it, you will be able to appreciate everything that we'll be talking about in this episode. If you know a bit about each of this, let's get started. We want to do a structured learning, isn't it? That's the reason I'm providing you a tracking template for 15 days of React design patterns. So this is a daily learning plan that you can download completely for free. And once you download, you will get a PDF with a full of instructions of how you can enable the template for yourself and can start using the template every day for every day session. Again, if you're coming from 40 days of JavaScript, you have got the similar thing in the past. This is just an extension that I want to use for 15 days of React design patterns as well. At the end, you will get a Notion page like this, which you can copy and add to your Notion just by clicking on this icon at the top, duplicate it. And what you get over here, you have each day's session listed out over here. So once you are done with the session, you can put the video link just for your bookkeeping purpose. You can track it with your learning date. Any kind of notes that you want to take, please take those notes over here. So gradually this become your handbook for this design pattern course entirely, right? And once you finish the 15 days and look back any point in time, you probably don't have to come to these videos at all because you have taken enough notes and you can learn from it. You can share on social media, whatnot you can do. In case of 40 days of JavaScript, this was a super hit, I would say. So I'm sure that for 15 days of React design pattern also, you're going to like it. So please go to this link. Again, the link is in the description of this video. Get it for free and start using it. To look into the code smells and understand them, let us look into a React component, which is like already written, baked, but written in a bit messy way. And we'll try to identify what are the different problems that the component might have, right? For that purpose, we'll create a React project. And one thing that I want to call out, like in every episode, we might use certain APIs, certain backends, right? But this is not a backend focused course. So our focus will be on the React side of it, but still we'll keep using certain APIs and all. And for that, I want to give you this repository called fake APIs. So if you come to github.com/tapaScript, you can follow this organization and then come to fake-APIs, you will have a fake APIs. It's very well documented. Like, if you want the list of users, you want one user, you want post by the users, is built based on JSON server. So if you need it for any of your UI project, you don't want to be online to use any APIs, this is something that you can easily use. And how to run it, how to set it up, all these instructions are there in the beginning itself. Just simple npm install and npm start or npm dev, anything you can do, right? And it will give you a bunch of APIs to use. We are going to use this API server in today's episode as well to demonstrate certain use cases. For example, we'll be doing user profile and then how many posts written by a user, that kind of UI we are going to build. For that, we need data. So why don't we use this API server itself? This is the code for that API server. I have already imported into my VS Code. So I can come to the terminal and can do yarn dev. And as you see, it is running on localhost 3001. And this is going to give me APIs for users, posts, categories, products, cart, a lot of things. The task that I'll be giving you at the end of the session, you have to use some of these APIs as well. So please follow along. Now, if I take this URL, come to the browser and do API/users, I have a bunch of users. If I do user/user ID, let's say one, I get only that particular user. If I want to know how many posts written by this user /post I can do, I'll get the number of posts written by this user. So there are varieties of APIs available for you to use. Great. Let's go back to the React side. Now let's create a React project. If you are aware of Vite, you can create a React project using Vite because now create React app nobody uses is deprecated. Vite is the one that you can use. I have a project template for you called code in React 19. You can use this. By the way, all these links you don't have to note down now is there in the description of this video. You can go ahead. I have noted them very well in the description so that you won't miss it. You can go to any of this link that I'm talking about while watching this video and make use of them. And as this is the first episode, I'm going in detail talking about each of this link. From the following episodes, we won't be talking about them, assuming that you already know about them. So come to home etapas code in React 19. And here again, come to the documentation, copy this command, clicking on this icon, go to your VS Code. In my case, I have already created a folder called day01 and I'm inside day01 folder. Coming here, let me paste this. And what it requires, it just requires a project name. So I'll be removing this placeholder and instead of this, I'm giving a project name called container presenter pattern. Okay. and I'll press enter. The moment I do that, I'll see a bunch of code will be getting added. See, if I expand this, a bunch of code got added over here, and this is nothing but a Vite based React project, which I can run immediately. So to do that, let me go cd inside the folder that I have created just now. And first I'll install a bunch of dependencies I need for this project. You can do npm install, I can do yarn install, whatever. Now it will go ahead, install and create the node underscore modules. It created this. And now I can do yarn dev, which is going to run the UI on this particular URL, http localhost 5173. I'm going to copy this one, going to go to my browser once more and paste this link. I have the basic UI that I had created with this scaffolding available over here. I'm going to remove all of this. I'm going to create my own stuff. So first thing that we're going to look into a messy component and want to understand what are the different code smells exist. Let's do that. So here is the UI to show a user profile. We have the user's DP, this image, name, email, some bio about the user. There is a way to edit the user profile and recent articles or the posts written by the user. For individual post, we are showing a post title, bit of summary of the post and when the post was published. If we click on the edit profile, we are making each of this field editable, where I can type more about the name, email, or their bio and can save them. All this data that you're seeing over here is pulled from that fake API that I have showed you just now. But first, so if this is the UI, let's look into the messy code using which we have developed this UI. So inside this container presenter pattern folder that we have created, inside src, I have created a folder called messy way because we are first looking into the messy way of code, the code smell. Inside that, I have created a folder called components, and we're going to look into this particular component, React component called user profile.jsx. Let's open it up. Let me explain what is happening over here. We are using two hooks from React. One is called useState, another is useEffect. UseState is a hook that is used to create different states for the component. States are nothing but the private data of a component. So for this component, I need the user data. That's the reason there is a state for user. For each of the user, the number of posts that I want to show. So there is a post, it has to be an array. So initialized with an array. I'll be making an API call to fetch the data, right? Now the API call might take certain time. In that time, I want to show certain loading. That's the reason this loading state is there. In case there is an error, to manage the error and show it on my UI, there is an error state. You would have noticed that there is an editing state, right? When I'm clicking on a button to edit the profile information, I'm making all of those fields editable. So I have to toggle between an edit mode and non-edit mode. That's the reason this is editing state is there. And if I'm in the editing mode and I'm submitting the username and the bio information, all these changes, that has to be taken inside some kind of object so that I can push that into the backend API. For that, there is another state called form data. Very simple. I have the states. And then I'm taking a props, which is like user ID. So it means that if I pass a user ID, let's say 1, for that user whose user ID 1, I am going to fetch the details put inside this user state. I am going to fetch the details of the post written by that user, going to put inside that. While I'm doing any fetching, this loading indicator will be used. If there is an error, this error state will be used. If I go ahead and edit that profile, is editing will be used. After editing, when I'm submitting, this form data will be used. Right. Now, if I change the user ID from 1 to 2, when I'm using this component somewhere else, for that purpose, let's open up app.jsx file. Inside app.jsx file, I have imported this user profile, and you're seeing that user profile, user ID, I'm passing the value as 1. Right? This is the value that is getting passed over here as well. Correct? Now, if I'm changing the value from 1 to 2, I want this component to act on the new user ID, isn't it? That's the reason I am having an user effect over here. So as long as the user ID changes, whatever I have written inside this use effect will be rerun. So first time for user ID 1, it will fetch the user data, fetch the post data, render that. If I change the user ID from 1 to 2, it is again going to fetch the new user data because this will rerun new post data, again going to render. Okay. In React, whenever there is a state change, your JSX part, the presentational part of your component will be re-rendered. We know that. Great. Now quickly let's look into the fetch user data. A very simple function, if you are coming from the background of JavaScript and if you know the promises, async, await, and everything, I think it is pretty simple for you, right? Making a call to an API, and this API happens to be the API server that I'm running locally. So my Vite API base URL, if I go to .env, I will see which is nothing but localhost 3001. Pretty simple thing, right? So on localhost 3001, there is API users, and for the user ID that I have passed over here, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is going to fetch me the data for that user. After getting the data from there, I'm extracting name, email, bio, and then setting into the form data so that I can show that basically that user data. Simple. Similarly, for that particular user, I am fetching the post. After getting the post data, I am setting into the post state, correct? So post is also over. There is one more for in case I am editing that user, and you know that if you know from the REST standard point of view, once you edit something, edit a resource, you make a put call. That's the reason I'm making a put call, and I'm passing the edited data, and then whatever the response data I am getting from my API, I'm setting that as a user state, right? So this is very simple. And then last, there is a JSX, and see how this JSX is being handled. If it is loading state, I am showing, oh, loading user profile. If there is an error, I am showing, oh, there is an error. And if there is no loading state, if there is no error, what I am doing, I am first putting that user image. If it is not in editing mode, the user's profile, basically the bio and the email, everything, and the edit profile button. If somebody has clicked on the edit profile button, that means I'm in the editing mode. In that case, I am making everything inside the input boxes so that user can type and change. Very simple thing. Input box, text area. And after that, I have two buttons to cancel the edit or to save the edit. And it's not getting over. After that, I have to do the post list. For the post list one, I have the post array. I am iterating through the post array and taking each of the post out, and then I am rendering each of the post details, their title, their content, the some part of the content, and when this was created or the published. So that's my JSX. And this particular component renders a beautiful UI over here. It works perfectly. I can edit profile, I can edit things, I can read the post, everything. Then where is the problem? Let's talk about the problems. Let's talk about the code smells. And there is not only one code smell, there are multiple such code smells are there. The first code smell problem that we have is called single responsibility principle violation, which is also having a shortcut called SRP. What a single responsibility? In the last session, we told a component should do one task. An ideal component should do one task and it should do that task perfectly. Now, this component, have you seen what are the things that this component is doing? This component, first of all, making an API call. Okay, it uses this Axios library, makes the API call. We have seen that. Here we have the API call, a bunch of API calls we are making. Then it manages multiple pieces of state. Do you see that? It manages the state for user, it manages the state for post, it manages the state for loading, it manages the state for error, it manages the state for editing, it manages multiple state. So definitely this is not a component which is doing one task and one task perfectly. It's trying to do multiple tasks. Multitasking is good, but sometimes multitasking brings problem. Apart from that, it also handles form logic. If I go below, I would see a profile form over here, isn't it? So all the form submission, like editing of the form, saving the form, all this logic are handled in the same component. It is doing a mammoth rendering, the rendering of loading, the rendering of error, the rendering of editing, the rendering of images, the rendering of user details, everything happening. Not only that, we are also doing the entire error handling also over here, isn't it? So this is really breaking the single responsibility principle for me as a component. So that is the alert number one, code smell number one for me. Identified. Code smell number one. Please note down. Second, reusability. What if this particular error component I need elsewhere in my application? Today I have showed you just a user profile page. Tomorrow, if I create a post list page where all the posts by all the user will be listed, and if there is some error happen while retrieving all the post, I want to show that error, I cannot really reuse it. I have to merely copy this entire component, entire code from here to there, and then paste into the new component, can use it. Same thing goes for the loading as well, isn't it? This loading is something very common. Loading user profile, loading post list, something that going to change is only this text, but remaining portion remain exactly same. But I am not able to reuse any of these things. So that's a big code smell for me. The third code smell is the poor testability. We developers don't like to write tests, but believe me, in some organizations, you cannot avoid writing tests. Not only writing tests, in fact, the coverage of close to 99% is mandatory. You have to write tests for every component that you define, every component that you create. Now, how would you, if you're coming from that background of test, writing test for components, how would you test this component? You need to mock access, you need to mock multiple API endpoints, you need to have complex state interactions, you need to mock complex user interactions all in one place. So it is very, very difficult to test also. So poor testability is code smell number 3 for me. And the fourth, because of all this, it is difficult to maintain. Tomorrow, if there is a new feature comes, for example, here we are not allowing to change the DP or the image, the profile image of the user. If you want to do it, you will come and you have to edit this component alone because nothing exists beyond this component. So it is very, very difficult to maintain. Any change to the business logic requires touching the same file by multiple people, that handles rendering, that handles API interaction, that handles state management, all these things together. So there are higher chances that you will be introducing bugs. There will be higher chances that you will be introducing something very unknowingly, and it might only come out on production, which will be really, really bad for you and definitely for the organization. Then what is the solution? So the solution we are talking about today is the container presenter design pattern solution. Let's understand what this design pattern bring on table and how we can adopt it in the messy component so that we make it much more reusable and can remove all those code smells that we spoke about. Here is my messy component. The messy component we have seen, which makes API call, which makes multiple state management, multiple rendering, everything is together, very hard to do testing, very hard to take out things and everything, all compact in one component. Not, of course, breaking the SRP single responsibility principle is breaking. Now, if I have to transform this messy component as per the container presenter component, this is what I'll be doing. First, I'll be creating something called a container component. Imagine this is a big container component. What exactly a container component is? A container component is responsible for all sort of data handling and data fetching. A container component will never ever deal with any sort of presentations. Presentation means the UI structure, the HTML, the CSS, the loading, this, that. It never ever deal with it. It is having only one job, that is fetching the data and to manage the data. Once it gets the data, the next step that a container component does is it's pass the data to another component which we call a presenter component. The responsibility of a presenter component, as the name suggests, is to present the data that container has got and push to it so that we can make sense out of it. You understanding? So now we are talking about breaking this messy component which you're seeing in the blue color at the left to break into two components minimally. One is the container component, which will deal with the data and then pass the data to another component which is responsible for presentation. It doesn't do anything with the data fetching, doesn't do anything so fancy. Its job is to just to get the data and display the data, render the data. And that is the reason people call a container component as a smart component, because it deals with the data and all this handling, and the presenter component as a dumb component because it doesn't deal with the data. Whatever given to you, just render it. But I don't like those smart dumb names. We are going to call it as a container and the presenter component. Now, one more thing that you need to remember, sometimes the presenter component might even grow bigger. So presenter component means it has to have JSX, isn't it? Because JSX is the part of a component that is responsible for giving you the UI structure with HTML, CSS, and all these things. Now, sometime it might happen that a presenter component's JSX structure is so big. If you take this user profile for an example, it has a top level profile section, below the post section, inside individual post section, post details, and all these things. So the JSX for a presenter component also might grow. That's the reason the design pattern go to the extent of breaking this presenter component even in smaller components inside, right? So again, if I look into this, a messy component that you have to break into two components. One is container that deals with data, push the data to a presenter component. Presenter component takes the data and then it can reorganize the data, dice and slice the data and pass that into smaller mini presenter components inside it and can manage it overall. Understood this diagram? If you understood this diagram, now what we're going to do, we're going back to we're going to go back to our messy code, and following this principle, following this pattern, this is the container presenter pattern. We're going to break that UI, reorganize the things, and make it working the way it is working right now. But at the end of the day, you will see that the code will be much more organized and readable and maintainable. So we have a task to break this messy component adhering to the container presenter pattern, right? So to do that, inside src, let's create a new folder called with hyphen pattern, because with pattern we're going to solve this, isn't it? Now inside with pattern, again create another folder called components, where we are going to create all the components inside it, and this is where our breaking will start. So first thing first, we have to create a presenter component. We have to create a container component. First is a container component. So when you're thinking about breaking something really messy to a container presenter pattern, always start with the container component. So let us first, inside the components, create a new file and give it a name called user container.jsx, and let's create a dummy component. So this is my user profile container.jsx, and what we told, this guy is supposed to handle only the data fetching part, is not going to interact with anything that is presentational. Now if I go to the messy component for a moment, open this up from this messy way components user profile.jsx, what are the things that you think of that are related to the data oriented thing? Of course, Axios. We really need Axios because that is how we'll be fetching and making the call. And then we would need these methods like fetch user data. We would need fetch user post. All this method we need because these are all interacting with the data. Now, this is not only interacting with the data. After fetching the data, it is also modifying certain state. For example, here you are modifying the or updating the post state. Here you are updating the user state, you are doing some updation of the state. So that means you also need to bring certain state from here, like user state, post state, all the state you need to bring from here, like loading, because you're making the API call, you'll be loading for it. If the API call fails, you will be erroring out. So these states are required. So I definitely need, that means use state, because using use state, you will be creating this state, and this force state for sure, because after data fetching, if you see, we are just updating these states only. We are updating set user, we are updating set loading, we are updating set error, here we are updating set post, we are updating these things, right? So first let's copy this two line, go to user profile container, paste it over here. Okay, then you need these states. So let's take from here to error, or these four states. Let's go ahead and paste it over here. See, we are not writing it from the scratch. We are making or transforming a messy component using container presenter pattern. Then the next thing I need this use effect, because for each of the user ID change, okay, that reminds me, I need this user ID also, and I'll be putting it over here. Ignore all this error is going to go. And then I need this use effect. I'm going to copy this use effect as it is. I'm going to copy this use effect just after use state. That is how it was in my messy component. So this is over there. After that, I am going to copy this fetch user data. Okay, so let's copy this fetch user data as it is without any change. I've copied this fetch user data. I'll come here and I'll put fetch user data over here. A few errors gone, fine. After that, what I have fetch user post. Okay, let's take fetch user post also, because this is another data that we will be getting. So let's go ahead and paste fetch user post also. So fetch user data, fetch user post, both I got over here. Now if you look into the fetch user data that we have copied, set user, great. After getting the user, it is updating the user state, and for that we have already taken the set user, so it's great, it is working great. But if you notice, it also has something called set form data. That's what we have copied from the messy component, right? The set form data we have copied from the messy component over here. But we have not copied the form data state at all over here, right? Form data state we have not copied from here to here. Why? What is the reason? Because we told that the container component has to deal with only the data fetching. For data fetching purpose, these are the only four states that we require. The form editing, whether form has to be edited, after form editing, whatever the data the form has got edited with, or whatever the data that I have come up with, that are all UI related thing, that are all presentation related thing. So when I create a presentational component, when I create the presenter component, it makes sense to move is editing, because somebody had clicked on the button or not, because button is the part of your JSX, is a part of your presentational component. It makes sense there. Editing, after hitting the editing, form filling up, All this data that I have to capture has to go inside the form data. Makes sense that it goes there. But right now I don't have a need. So what I can do over here, I can come and I can delete this portion from here because I have not copied the state of it. So I don't need it. Fair enough. So this much is enough for my fetch user data. This much is enough for my fetch user post. These are the two things that I wanted. Now, after this, what we have seen in the diagram, if you remember, the yellow color was the container. It fetched the data. Data fetching part is done. Both of them fetched user data, fetched post data. And it's populated the user data inside the user state, post data inside the post state. Now it has to pass this user data, pass this post data to the presenter component. Remember the diagram, right? You had the container, you fetch the data and then pushing the data towards a presenter component. Now it's time we go back and create our presenter component. So for that, I'll come inside this with pattern, components, new file, create user profile presenter.jsx, and then create a dummy component called user profile presenter. Okay. Now this user profile presenter has to be used inside the user profile container. We know that, right? So for that purpose, I will go ahead over here and import my user profile presenter over here. Okay. Now this is my presentational component. This is where I'll be pushing this user, I'll be pushing this post. So that taking the user and post, all the JSX, all the UI part, I can do it inside the user profile presenter component. So let's go back to our JSX at the bottom, and instead of returning this div, we will be returning this user profile presenter, and we have to pass the user data and the post data. The way we pass data from one component to another component, the way that component talk to each other using something called props. So I have to pass the props. So first prop that I'll be passing is called the user prop. Okay. Then the next prop I'll be passing is the post, because I have to pass the post also. I pass the post prop also. We have two more state, isn't it? One is called loading, another is called error. Let us pass those things also, because based on the loading state, I'll be showing a loading indicator, that also UI. Smart component or container component should not do it. Presenter component only should do it. So for that purpose, I'll be passing loading also to this. And then there is an error also, isn't it? If there is some error happened, set error we are calling. If there is an error happened on the API call, I am setting some error. How about this error state? I want to show it on the UI. Again, showing it in the UI is the presenter's job. It is not container's job. Container's job is over. Data fetching is over. Done. So if this state has populated with something that I have to show on my JSX, on my UI, I have to again delegate that work to my presenter. Good enough? So user, post, loading, error, all this thing I have given to my presenter component. You see now no more error over here. Again, ignore this warning. This warning I'm going to explain in the future pattern. For now, ignore this warning. Okay. So now I am good. I'm good with this. What I have to do now, I have to go to this user profile presenter component and I have to accept these props. So I'll go to user profile presenter component and I'll be accepting these props, which are nothing but user post loading error. It's showing error because I have defined this variable but not used yet. Okay, so we'll be using it very soon. Great. Now we are in the presenter component. So presenter component's job is to do all the presentation. We have learned that. The first presentation that ever come in my mind, what, is to handling this state. What if loading is true and we are making loading as true the moment we started fetching the user data, and then we are making it false at a later point in time when the data fetching is over. So when loading is true, I want to show a loading indicator. Now previously it was done within this messy component together. So if I go to this loading part for you, it was done over here, isn't it? So what I can do, I can just copy this code, go to my presenter code, and I can blindly paste it over here. Imagine this is how I am refactoring this code one by one. It might look all red, messy, what am I doing? But each step matters. So in the presenter component, if the loading is true, I am going to show this loading indicator over here. Now there is a problem. We told that this loading indicator is something that we should be using common way in multiple places. Now, whenever this occurs, you have to think in the design pattern way. It means that you have to extract this out and create a common component that you can use in multiple places. One place is definitely going to be like this, but you can use it in a multiple places. So now with that thought, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go inside this with pattern, create a new folder inside the components, called common. And inside this common folder, I'm going to create a new component called loading spinner.jsx. And I'm going to create this loading spinner component that can take a loading message, go back to my presenter class, blindly copy this guy from here to here, just cut it, come to loading spinner, put it into its JSX. Here it is hard coded this P, isn't it? Instead of hard coding, we want to make it like a dynamic component. For any kind of loading message, whether loading profile, loading post, I will be able to use this. And this message can come from the caller who is calling it, right? So this is my loading spinner component. Now I'll come to the presenter. I'll be importing this loading spinner, and instead of hard coding that all the divs, now I can, if it is a loading, if loading is true, I can use this loading spinner component. It takes a props called message, and now as I am dealing with what I am loading, I am loading say user profile. I can put the message saying that hey, loading user profile, and this is how I have done a beautiful refactoring, isn't it? If it is loading, then in this case, instead of using a bunch of JSX, I have isolated the JSX in a separate component called loading spinner, and I'm using it over here. Same thing I can do for error message, isn't it? So if you see our messy component, it has something called if error. Let me copy this again. And then I'll go to the presenter component. Just below the loading, I'll be pasting this. And again, you have a bunch of JSX over here. I can take all this JSX and create a brand new component. And again, it's a common component inside the common folder called error message.jsx, and here I can accept a title, I can accept a message, and if there is an error happen, if I want to retry that error, I can do a function call on retry. I can pass this thing as props. Now from the presenter, let me just copy paste, see how these things gets mapped. I just cut it again just like before, come here and replace this. So here this is the title which is hard coded. Instead of that, let's make it dynamic. So whatever the title passed to this error component, it will be rendered over here. Cool. This message I can print over here, and there is an on retry function I can pass from outside. Like in case user want to retry after an error happen, click on it, they can actually do it, and this is a button that takes care of it. So I now have a reusable common error message component. Then I can go to user profile presenter again, just like before we did for loading spinner. I can import the error message from here and take the error message, come to this if error, use this error message, pass the props. What could be the props? The title could be oops, something went wrong. The message could be the error that we are already getting as a props. And there is third one called on retry. We can pass a function called on retry. Now you will ask me, where is this function can come from on retry? Now you have to think as a developer, what is going to happen with on retry? If there is an error happen, it will say oops, something went wrong, then the error message, and there is a button called on retry. Let's say I'm trying to fetch the user, but there is an error. It is going to tell, hey, oops, something went wrong. Fail to fetch the user information, and there is a button called on retry. So when somebody click on that on retry button, it is going to initiate another call, another attempt to fetch that user data. So if it is going to use another call, another attempt to fetch the user data, that means it's going to make an API call. It is again going to deal with the data. Who deals with the data? Container component or presenter component? Of course, container component. That means this on retry method should not be inside the presenter component. It should be somewhere in the container component, and container component should pass this to presenter component as a props. That means this on retry, understanding how we are connecting the design pattern to the actual code. Now this on retry, that means I have to take as a props over here, and these props must be passed to the presenter component from the container. Ready? Making sense? Now, in the on retry, we can, as the naming convention goes, if you are dealing with certain function passed as a props from one component to another component, the left side of the property should start with the word called on retry, and the right side of the function name should start with handle. So I'll tell it as handle retry. This is the naming convention again. If you don't give this name, still things will work, but this is what industry follow. It is like a plain English on retry, handle retry means you try to retry. So now I can write this handle retry method over here saying const handle retry. What handle retry is going to do is going to just fetch the user data. That's it. Are you seeing how things are getting stitched now? How beautifully things are getting stitched? So I identified that on error, I have to do a handle retry. Handle retry is going to make a call, and that call cannot be in the presenter component. I have to push that call to the container. So I have pushed that to the container through props, and this is nothing but taking a function. So I followed some naming convention, and after that on retry, I am just fetching the user data again. So simple, so good, cool. Let's proceed with the presenter. So I have taken care of loading. I have taken care of error. It's time that I take care of user. It's time that I take care of post. Let's do that. Let us take a look into this UI once again. If you look into this UI basically having two sections. One section is this, which is like your profile or the profile header, correct? And then there is another section which is like your post, which is over here, bottom. And when I was showing you the diagram, right, how the messy component can be broken into container versus presenter, what I told in the presenter also, you can have a mammoth JSX. Instead of having a mammoth JSX, can you break them into more granular components? So now I have an opportunity actually to break this, big JSX, this entire JSX to display user and the user's post into at least two major components. One component I call as a profile header, where I'll be able to show this DP, I'll be able to show this form, I'll be able to, when it is in the editing mode, I'll be able to show this form with all this data editable, this cancel and save button. When it is not in the editable mode, I'll be able to show the name, I'll be able to show the email, I'll be able to show the bio with the non-editable. And then I can have another component which is like a recent post or a bunch of posts, where I can have a post list, and inside this post list I can have individual posts displayed over here, right? That is how I can think about breaking my components now. Are you getting my point? So it means if I go back to code now, come to this messy component, till error I have taken care. Look into this. This is the profile header and this is the user post. So this div, outer div, let me copy. Very innocent div, Let me copy over here this innocent div. And inside this innocent div, from the messy component, this is the profile header. This entire thing, I can take it into one component called profile header component. Okay. And this profile header requires the user data. In the presenter, I already have the user data that I have passed. So if I create a component now called profile header, pass the user data to it, I can fit all the user data like the user's bio, photo, everything into this particular GSX I'm talking about, right? It is having that user photo, editing mode, user bio, and all these things, whatnot. So good. The first problem solved. Second problem, I can create another component called post list, and I can pass all the post data I have already to the post list component, and then copy this post user post JSX, which actually deal with all the post and then do its job. Right now, you are going to break this component even further to create the smaller components, right? So let's go ahead and create two components inside the components folder under with pattern called profile header.jsx. Let's create a skeleton and let's create another component called postlist.jsx. Again, let's create a skeleton. So I have created these two components. Now coming to the presenter, let me import them. One is called profile header and another is called post list. And going to my JSX, inside this, first is the profile header. We'll pass all these props later. And then next is the post list. Okay, good enough. Now let's take from our messy component each of these sections. Okay, let's start with the post list first, because that is, I believe, is little bit more simpler than the user one, because there's that editing and all these things are there, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this guy, this post, as it is from here. Again, copy this. Go to this post list component. Come to its JSX. Just replace this div with this. Now you are getting error that there is no post. Fair enough, because I have to pass the post to this post list component as a props. All my error gone. And in the presenter, wherever I'm using this post list component, I can just pass this post props because I have this post data already with me. I'll be passing it. I am sorted. My post list is sorted. Okay. See how easy it is. Just I copy pasted the JSX into the post list. I already had the bunch of posts coming from my container, because container is giving me this data. After fetching the data, my work as a presenter to just present it. But while presenting, instead of copying this entire JSX from here, from the messy component, and putting inside the presenter's JSX, I am further breaking down, further breaking down the component. In fact, if I go to this post list component, don't you think you can break this down even more? You can actually take from here to here and create another component called post and pass this post as a prop to that particular component. How awesome it is, right? You want to do that? Please do that. I'm leaving it to you as a task. You can go ahead, refactor this portion of it, create another component called post, singular, P-O-S-T, which will take a single post as a prop and you pass to that, and this entire JSX will be inside that post.jsx, and you will be importing the post.jsx inside post and things will work. You are building a component hierarchy. How awesome it is, right? One by one, from a mammoth component to reusable single unit component. Okay, so let's go to our another component that we'll be talking about, probably the last component, which is called profile header. So for profile header also, I'll go to the messy component. Let's copy this profile header JSX from here. Come over here. Let's remove everything. Let's paste this guy. Okay. Now I have bunch of things to work with. If you see, there are a bunch of error. There definitely a error about user. I have to pass user just like post before user. So the user error gone. Now I have something called is editing. In the messy, is editing was there as a state. I have not copied this to anywhere. Form data also I have not done. But if I come to this profile header, it has is editing, it has set is editing, it has bunch of this handle input change, bunch of things that I have to handle. Now let's do that. So I have passed user over here. I need is editing. Okay, I'll be passing is editing also from here, assuming I'll be passing these things. What else I need? I need form data. Okay, so form data also will come from the top, assuming I'm just keep passing. Now notice over here, this set is editing actually got copied because of this particular state. And in this profile header, we are not managing any state so far. We don't want to manage any state because it's a pure presentational component over here. I just want to give the data like user data and bunch of things. I just want to display that. So I don't want to really create another state over here and the setter method of that and pass it over here. Rather than that, I assume that from its parent is this particular presenter guy, I'll be getting a method called on start edit, like whenever I start editing, and this method is what I'm going to call instead over here. Okay, on start edit. Let's just imagine that for now. So this is sorted. Let's see what are the other errors. Okay, next error is about the handle input change. So if I go to the messy one, I had a method called handle input change. Yes, over here. What is this method used to do? Whenever I'm in the edit mode, typing something on any of those fields, it used to collect the updated, the typed data that user have typed into a form data object. That's what it used to do. So I don't have this method over there, like handle input change, but I will assume that someone will pass this method to me from somewhere, so that in the parent of it, I will take care of it. But again, as the naming convention goes, if the props come, it has to start with the name called on, not for handle. Handle should be the actual function name that will execute. The value of the prop should be starting with handle, but the props name should always start with on when you are dealing function as a props. So I'll just rename this one to on input change, and assuming that an on input change will be passed over here. So wherever there is a handle, I'll be renaming it to on input, on input. Okay, I'm done. Now I see two more error. One is what happened when someone click on that edit and after editing the save. Again, this will come from the top as a props, and as it is props and click on this one, certain function has to execute. I can assume that this will call a function called on cancel edit because we are canceling the edit, and this will call a function called on save profile. So again, I will get this one on cancel edit from here as a prop, and I'll also get on save profile as a prop. This is how I am refactoring it. Okay, I don't want to manage any state over here whatsoever. My all the errors are gone. So let me just do a format. So this is what my props look like. I have user, is editing, form data. I have on start edit. I have on input change, on cancel edit, on save profile. Great. I have 7 props here. But if I go to my presenter component where I'm using this profile header, I have not passed any props. Now I have to pass them one by one. This is where the last magic is. So first props that I have to pass is the user. Pretty easy. We already have the user coming from container. So I'll take this and I will pass user equals to user. First one is sorted. Then next, there are a bunch of things. Is editing, where is it coming from? Form data, where is it coming from? On start edit, where? On input change, I don't have. On cancel edit, I don't have. On save profile, I don't have. I don't have any of this. Now I'll be creating this, right? So there's thing like is editing is something. Now in this presenter component, I can manage as a state. Okay. So if I go to the messy one, the few things that I have not copied, you remember, is the is editing and the form data, because these are very much UI centric. These states were not getting used after making any of the API calls. So they should not reside in the container component. But for managing my UI also, I need state, right? State is not only about after getting data. State is required to show hide things completely on the UI side, submitting the form data management, completely UI side, right? We need that. So I'll be creating these states inside my presenter component. Okay. So inside my presenter component, let's create this state. As I'm using use state, let's import use state from here. So I have this state created. Now this is editing. I can definitely now pass as a props to this. Agree? Okay. I have also created form data as a state. So I can definitely pass the form data also as a state. Done. So is editing form data done. Now we have on start edit, we have on input change, we have on cancel edit, and we have on save profile. Let's do this. What are each of these things? First is on start edit. I'll copy this, go over here and put on start edit. What will be the value of this one on start edit? Whenever someone wants to start editing, I want to toggle this particular state to true because it is in the editing mode. So is editing is true. So that means is editing states, setter method is set is editing. I will use that to set the value true for is editing. For that purpose, I can just do making set editing as true. So on start edit is solved. Now I have next one is on save profile. So let's go ahead on save profile. Here I want to do something. Saving profile means what? Saving profile means is definitely making an API call. Maybe in our case, it is a put call to save this profile into the database through API. So again, you're dealing with the data. Let's create a function called handle save profile. Okay. So let's create the function called handle save profile. Const handle save profile. Writing the arrow function. What it can do. So saving profile is usually a database call, right? You save something to the database through API, right? That means again you are interacting with the data. And now interaction with the data we won't be doing in the presenter component at all. Interaction with the data we'll be always doing from the container component. That means in the container side, I need to have something through which I'll be saving this particular user data. So let's assume that container will give me one function as a props, maybe call on update user. What has to happen? That on update user I can actually call over here, and this is going to make an async call, correct, taking the form data, correct, and that's why I should use await over here, and as I'm using await I should use async over here, and this will give me the result back, and I can do few things with this result. If the result is a success, I will turn off the editing mode. Okay. Even you can have one more state here called form error. Like if the result is error, you can populate the form error again, can pass down to your presentational component and can show the error for the form also. Like all these things you can do, right? You can keep doing, keep adding the feature. Now adding the feature is no more difficult because things are very much localized. Okay, good. So I have handled this, handle save profile. Now what next for me? So I'm done with user is editing form data on start edit on save profile. Okay, I have to do for this too. Let me copy this too. On input change and on cancel edit. Go over here and put this two. One is with on input change, we will do something. Another is on cancel edit, we will do something. On cancel edit is pretty simple, right? You have to come out of the edit mode. That's all you need to do. So let's call a method call. We can make set is editing as false. We can reset the user data if user data exists. We can do set form data to the user data that exists, its name, its email, its bio. Very simple, here I missed an equals. Okay, so this is my handle cancel edit. Now the last method is on input change. Let's call and handle input change, and we will create an handle input change const handle input change. If you remember, we already had this method over here, right? That handle input change. We can just copy this from our messy code, come to our presenter, just replace this. That's all we need, correct? So now my presenter is also done. Let me just format this code so that you can understand correctly. And overall, let me also check the order I have passed this props over here. User is editing form data. User is editing form data. On start edit. On set profile. Input change. On cancel edit. On start edit. Input change. Cancel edit. And then save profile. There is something wrong. So I think on save profile will go at the end just to make the sequence correct. Okay, so the right props get passed. Yes, so cool. Now let's look into this overall thing. Okay, I'll close this user profile. So I have a container function. This container function's only job that it fetches data for you for each of the user ID passed to it. After it's fetching the data, it populates certain state that it needs to populate, because this data it has to pass to the presenter. It populates this state and pass to its presenter. The presenter is over here, user profile presenter. It passed user, post, loading, and error. All this on retry we added later because we wanted to handle the retry. Retry again trying to fetch is a data fetching. So that's the reason handle retry also should reside over here. Okay, very simple container. Going to the presenter, we have broken the presenter into two more components, one for showing the profile header, another for showing the post list. We got the post already from the container, so we can pass the post as a props, and inside the post list the same JSX that we had inside the messy, copy pasted, made it work. For the profile header, it requires user data, so we pass the user data. We have a editing mode, so for that we have to do this is editing state, and this state was there in the messy component. We didn't put that inside the container because it is a state management for the UI alone, not for data. So we are managing those two state only in the presentational component. This is how you have to think, guys. Presentational component state, container component state has to be separated out, because something you're dealing with the data. After the data you want to populate and store the data somewhere, and somewhere you are just managing the user state. So we have separated it out. We have taken care of loading with a simple common component, taken care of error with a simple error message component. Awesome things happening. Along with that, there are a bunch of function, like when somebody changed the input, what happened? Doing a handle input change. When somebody cancel the edit, what happened? Handle cancel edit. When somebody saved the profile, what happened? Handle save profile. Handle save profile again has to make a call to the database through API. So for that reason, we need something called an on update user. When user gets updated, what happened? That we cannot do in the presentational component because it's a data related issue. It's a data related methodology. We have to pass it to the container. If I want to pass this functionalities to the container, to the function as a function, I have to pass it to the container, and then I have to pass that as a props to my presenter so that I can get it right. So I have this on update user. I am passing as a props, but if I go to my container after on retry, I have to pass this on update user, and here I am calling a method called handle update user. Let's define handle update user, console const handle update user. Inside this, you will make another API call, updated user data over here, and then you can write your logic. Isn't it awesome? This has to be an async call again, because we'll be making the API call using Axios. You can, with from the user data, you can retrieve the user ID, and taking the user ID, you can make a put call. You can update the user, as you wish. So this is how the things are stitched from the container to the presenter. So this messy component that we have used over here, now we have broken into multiple smaller components, and these multiple smaller components are working really well, should be working really well as per the expectation. Same UI will be working. Now what you need to do next to make it work, what is your entry point after this refactoring? Your entry point is the user profile container. So you will take this user profile container, you go to the app.jsx file. Instead of importing your messy user profile, you will be now importing the user profile container. I will be using user profile container over here. Container interns using the presenter. After fetching the data, it push it to the presenter. Everything will work as it is. One more thing that I want to talk about is the directory structure. So whenever you are breaking things into multiple components, please make suitable directory structure also. For example, I now reorganize this thing saying that a new folder called post or post, whatever you want to do. My post related thing can go inside the post. Okay, I have just moved it here. Now I can create something called again a profile, right? I can create something called a profile, and all my profile related things, this one, then this guy, then this guy, can go inside the profile. Yeah, you see this. Now look at this from the directory structure point of view. I had just one messy way, one component, one gigantic component. Now I have bunch of component. User profile also should go inside profile. I have bunch of component. They have reorganized to the relevant folder. My common is having error message and loading spinner because it's a common component. The post is having one component related to the post list. You can create another post component also, I told. And then the profile is having profile header, user profile container, and the presenter. Isn't it awesome? So this is how I have actually reorganized. If you go one more level, like you have multiple container, multiple presenter in your application, you can create container, presenter at different folders, put all the containers into one, put all the presenter into one. So you reorganize your components all together. So what we did, we actually broken a messy component into multiple simpler, smaller component, keeping the container and the presenter design pattern in mind. And the design pattern, again, to reiterate, a messy component that we want to break into one container component. Container component does the data fetching. After data fetching, it will push the data to a presenter component. And inside presenter component, you can have multiple smaller component, and the relevant data can be passed as a props and can be managed. I hope now you can relate with the code that we have just now written. So our last few things, when should you use this container presenter pattern? You should use it when you have a data heavy component. It's perfect for components that fetch data from APIs like, user dashboard, a products catalog page, an analytics report, a real time, data display. So all this kind of application, if you see, they just show the data, but the fetching part, you can give the responsibility to the container component, pass the data as a props to the individual presenter component, break the presenter component to multiple smaller components. Think about user dashboard. You can do that, right? Each of the widget could be a presenter component, and there could be a big presenter component inside that all the widget get fit. That presenter component can be inside a container component which fetch the data. So this is one. Another place will be the form heavy application. It is excellent for complex form validation kind of thing, like multi-step wizard, right? Next, you go multi-stage wizard, then the setting of the panels, your checkout process, survey forms. Those are the use cases where you can use container presenter pattern, and you would love using that container presenter pattern as a very base pattern for separating out your data layer, data handling, and the presentational component. I hope you found it helpful. Now let us discuss some of the pitfalls or where you should not be using basically. So don't over engineer a simple component to break into a container presenter pattern. If the component is very simple, for example, you have one component like that loading spinner, or one component for that error message one, like one standalone component. You don't have anything to do with really container presenter pattern over there, isn't it? Unless that error component may be the one, because there is a data fetching, you can push it at the top, but the loading spinner is a very simple component. So don't use this pattern for simple components. Then second thing that can happen, you have seen that I have a presenter component. Inside that I had two more components, and I have passed a bunch of props to each of the component. The number of props I have passed probably is 6 or 7, but I have passed only one level down. From the presenter component, it went to the profile component and to the post list component. That's it. But sometime it might happen that you end up passing too many props, maybe 10, 15 props, and through the multiple layers of component. For us, just one layer today we have seen, but it might happen you're passing through 2 layers, 3 layers, and all these things. So if that is going to happen, you're saying that, okay, because of my container presenter design pattern, I'm getting into this particular problem, you have to apply another design pattern. That's what we're going to learn in our course. That's called the context design pattern, a complex state management design pattern where we learn about the state reducer pattern, right? All this pattern will come when your container presenter pattern is not enough. It is creating other problems. Then you have to think about those patterns. Gradually, as we move along till the 15th day, I'm sure that you will get all this thought process to switch your brain between, oh, this is the pattern I have to use now. This pattern is not going to use. Okay. So please make sure you remember these things. Now, the final thing is the task. The session never gets over without the task, and you don't go to the next session without finishing the task. Okay, so let me explain the task that I'm giving to you, and everything is based on whatever we have learned. Okay, first, create a product list container where you manage the API calls for data fetching. you manage some cart management, manage the error handling. We have done all of these things right today. Then create a product list presenter component that you'll be using inside the container component, and you'll be passing this data, right? Where you can render the products, because here you are making the API call to fetch the product. You can render the product. You can sort or filter the product because it's completely UI, and having a add to cart button. So when you do a add to cart button, it has to make an API call or add it to the data store. So that cart management data part is in the container one. Presenter is just the presentational part of it. Okay. Now, presenter component, you can break down into multiple components like how we did today for the post list and the other one. You can create the product cart, you can create the sort filter controls, you can create a cart summary, a different kind of small component. Okay, go with your imagination of UI, go with your imagination of styling. No boundaries over there, but this is what you need to do. And when I can say that this is done, only when your container has no JSX rendering logic. Our container doesn't have any JSX rendering logic. Your presenter doesn't have any API calls. Our presenter today doesn't have any API calls. Components are usable and testable, we know. And then the clear separation of concern. That's the rule that we spoke about, right? This is your task, guys. And where do you find this task? You can find everything over here under tapaScript. Please give it a follow and then go to repositories. You will find a repository called 15 days of React design pattern. Come to this. Once you come here, you will get a day level breakup. We have already done a day 0. Today we have done day 01. Once this video is published, you will get a day -01. Inside the day -01, you will find that task.md file that I have explained you from, right? So check out this one, and this particular repo will be managed really well with all the pointers of all the session. You already see that day 00 is already here. From here, you can go to the video. You can also go to the source code of it. If you like my work, don't forget to give it a star. There are a couple of folks I've already given. It will be really, really awesome thing, right? So this is the repo where you get it. But that's not all. Once you have successfully done your task, I want you to join tapaScript Discord. The link to join tapaScript Discord is in the description of this video. Once you come to tapaScript Discord, you will find something called 15 days of React design patterns. Over here, people who are doing 40 days of JavaScript, you also can do it. There is a separate section for 40 days of JavaScript, and folks keep discussing things over there. Here you will find under 15 days of React design pattern, there's something called task assignments. Come here and post about your task. Put your GitHub repo, post about your task. Let me look into it. Let me do these things, right? And then if you have any other discussion points, you can come to general and do all these discussion points. So what happened if you do all the task for all 15 days? What you get in return from me is like, I'm going to provide you a customized badge, like 15 days of React design pattern customized badge with your name in it, that you can use anywhere. You can use it in your profile, you can use it on social media. It is something from me to acknowledging your hard work that you are putting to learn this. Same thing is going to happen with the 40 days of JavaScript folks also. They're going to get a badge very soon, probably next week. You can come to tapascript.io, authenticate yourself. I have already authenticated myself. Go to your profile, and then you will see the badge like this, 40 days of JavaScript with your name inside it. You can download the badge. And then once you complete 15 days of React design pattern, like how 40 days of JavaScript happen, it's like there will be a place where you can give your GitHub URL where you have all these tasks listed. You post it. We have a process to go through it. And once this process is over, I will provide you this badge that you can use for any purpose. Okay. So I hope you find it exciting as well. So hey folks, I know a long video, and that's the reason I cannot make the video every day, and I should not make video every day. I take time. I promise to make 2 videos every week so that you have enough time to do the task and I have enough time to build this quality content. I hope you liked it. In case you liked it, it was useful to you, please let me know, comment below. Please like this video, please share about it, because I'm putting a lot of hard work and this all free for you guys, right, to learn. If you find it helpful, please do it for me. Share about 15 days of React design patterns. Up next in day 02, we'll be coming up with another design pattern. Until then, take a great care of yourself, stay well, keep learning, keep enjoying. Thank you.